Today is day 250 of the Debenhams dispute, and that is a terrible hardship for the mostly 1,000 women workers, their families, to have endured this battle for just and fair redundancy. And still, in the teeth of Christmas, they remain out protesting. Now, I heard your response to Deputy Barry early on about, you know, we shouldn't engage in the blame game and all this. And let me just put it very, very clearly, Taoiseach. The government, and I don't mean just your government, but the previous government, the Fine Gael Labour government as well, have a responsibility for the failure to legislate after Cleary's. Okay? You are responsible, and anybody who is in government since Cleary's have a responsibility. Not just about Duffy Cal, but all the issues that can leave a group of workers, like Debenhams workers, in a situation where they don't get just and fair redundancy. Okay? And that failure puts a responsibility on you to sort it out, which you have not done to ensure just redundancy for them. And I will say, very finally, Taoiseach, I was on the phone to the Arcadia workers this week, another 470 workers or so who are now possibly facing the same situation in Topshop, Miss Selfridge, Burton's and so on, where there is a liquidation underway and where they could find themselves in the same situation as Debenhams. And it is your responsibility in government to ensure that workers do not find themselves in that situation and to take responsibility for the collective failure of government to prevent this happening in the first place.
In relation to the CETA agreement, and there was a debate which was initiated by Fianna Fáil in the last Dáil on this agreement, and we initiated in our own private members' time. So I've always been for debate, Deputy, in relation to the Canadian-European Union Free Trade Agreement. And I believe in trade. And I think the decision of Sean Lemass, particularly in the 60s and in 1965 in terms of the Anglo-Irish Free Trade Agreement, removing tariffs and quotas from trade with Britain, which was a precursor to joining the European Union, was way ahead of his time, and Fianna Fáil was ahead of its time that time. And many other parties objected to joining the European Union and so on. And with the same old continuation of some of the residual legacy arguments from that. I actually believe I hear very little pro-trade contributions in the House for quite a number of years. Yet, as a former Minister for Enterprise, trade is the esprit de corps of our economy. I mean, many small to medium-sized companies depend on trade to create jobs and to add value to their companies. If you go out there and talk to the people in the SME sector, they were very happy with the Canadian-European Union Free Trade deal. They saw that as positive in terms of helping them to sell more of their software, of their health-based solutions, water-based solutions, in terms of water products and so on. We have a very exciting entrepreneurial sector in Ireland that depends on exporting its goods and services abroad. So the more of these agreements, the better actually for creating jobs in this country. People talk about corporations having too much power under SUTA. Corporations in Ireland employ hundreds of thousands. I never hear that being said by Deputies Murphy, Barry or Boyd Barrett. Never hear it being said. And I think that, yes, that debate needs to happen. And no one was trying to ram any debate through this House. Sinn Féin looked for an extra 10 minutes. That was your contribution to, you were happy with an extra 10 minutes. It's now that a political situation has arisen, maybe, that you feel you can create an impression that we're trying to ram something through. No, we're not. The agreement is in place for the last 3 years, provisionally. It's actually operational. And then in terms of Deputy Minister Ryan's view, I mean, Minister Ryan correctly points out that the agreement has changed, and the European Court of Justice decision, opinion 117 by the CJEU, dealt with the question of whether CETA's reformed investment rules comply with certain fundamental principles of European law, such as its autonomy. In a nutshell, the court held that CETA's investment chapter is fully compatible with European Union law and the treaties, including the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And it's the Commission's contention that the CETA investment chapter fully guarantees the protection of public interest measures from challenges by investors, fully protects from public interest measures from challenges by investors. One of the concerns raised in that case was whether CETA was compatible with the principle of equality before the law, Article 20, Charter of Fundamental Rights of the EU, and the principle of non-discrimination on grounds of nationality. In this regard, the CJEU reiterated its previous rulings that treaties concluded by the European Union must be compatible with fundamental rights, including the rights found in the Charter. And the CJEU also held that the CETA Tribunal will have no jurisdiction to interpret and apply rules of European Union law other than the provisions of CETA, nor can it challenge choices democratically made within Canada or the European Union with regard to the level of protection of public order or public safety, the protection of public morals, the protection of health and life of humans and animals, the preservation of food safety, protection of plants and the environment, welfare at work, product safety, consumer protection are equally fundamental rights. And those are the facts of the situation in relation to CETA and the investment court and the permanent investment court, which is consisted now of and composed of tenured judges, which is a difference from the original CETA, which has not been acknowledged in the contributions to date. And the CETA Tribunal has no jurisdiction to declare incompatible with CETA the level of protection of a public interest established by the European Union measures. So that should lay to rest any of the assertions that have been made in relation to this. And there is a remaining issue in terms of our economy. How is the Irish economy to develop into the future if we don't have export opportunities? If we don't conclude agreements with other countries. And this does not endanger in any way any public interest measure, doesn't endanger the environment or any measures we take here. We've just been from a European Union Council meeting where the highest ever ambition of the European Council was agreed by all of the member states in terms of 55% by 2030 cut in greenhouse gases and by being carbon neutral by 2050. That is the European Union's own agenda in relation to climate change. So how in the name of God does CETA and can CETA undermine that? It can't. And it won't. Okay? And in addition to that, the Commission and members, and the only challenge we have within the European Union is the reluctance of some member states to be as fully engaged in climate change as others, if we want to really achieve the climate change goals that I hope we're all agreed in relation to. And again, no one who opposes this, and it's the same kind of debates I've heard on an ongoing basis, no one ever debates the merits. I think I'm not clear on the economic model that the deputies would apply to Ireland, but I have a fair assessment that you're anti-multinationals. Fair enough, you're entitled to be. But they do create and employ hundreds of thousands of people in Ireland. You don't seem to care about the small to medium-sized enterprises who need markets overseas to create jobs, particularly in regional Ireland and across the regions. I don't know where you think we're going to create jobs into the future, or who's going to create them, or what real economic model you're putting, because I think you would create enormous destruction of jobs if your policies came through. On Debenham dispute, I dealt with that earlier in questions to Deputy Barry, and I would just say to Deputy Boyd Barrett, in relation to that, we would do what we can, but in terms of liquidations that happen, the state has a number of responses. One is statutory redundancy. Two is to help the workers in any way we possibly can to secure alternative employment, and also, in addition, to provide programmes and courses and additional skills and finance those to enable workers perhaps to get work in other areas if that's possible. And there's a fairly significant degree of resources put by government towards those ends.